So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke to New York Magazine, and she took some shots at Democratic leadership. Let's take a look. This is the headline here. AOC's warning for Democrats. We're in trouble. Let me show you some of the article. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thinks President Biden got played by Senator Joe Manchin. She doesn't think that. It's a fact. And the president's nostalgia for a bygone era of backroom deal-making could prove disastrous for Democrats in the midterms. Again, a fact. Sitting in her campaign office, she says this matter-of-factly, she's correct, as if bucking the explicit orders of her party's leaders, up to and including the President of the United States, is not that big of a deal. But it is. Quote, as a younger member of Congress, the first vote I ever cast was for Barack Obama, who was called a socialist, and all of this stuff. All of this rhetoric that we see today has been the political reality of my entire life. And so I never felt nostalgia for something that never really existed in my lifetime, she told me. Quote, I feel like our politics has fundamentally changed. Whether it's for the better or for worse is for people's determination, but I was never under the illusion that we can bring Manchin along. Ocasio-Cortez was one of only 6 Democrats, including Representative Jamal Bowman of the Bronx, to vote against Biden's $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill last November. She reasoned, correctly it turned out, that severing the infrastructure spending from Biden's much larger Build Back Better proposal would allow the bigger bill to be killed in the closely divided Senate by the defection of 2 conservative Democratic senators, Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. This is the first time any major publication has acknowledged that the progressives were right on that to withhold their votes and try to keep them together. I have the utmost respect and confidence in the president. Wrong. But I just felt like we called 2 different plays on this one, Ocasio-Cortez said. I think that there is a sense among more senior members of Congress who have been around in different political times that we can get back to this time of buddy-buddy and backslapping, and we'll cut a deal and go into a room with some bourbon and some smoke, and you'll come out and work something out. I think there's a real nostalgia and belief that that time still exists or that we can get back to that. But those days, she says, have been over for a long time. And the fact that Biden and others don't realize it, she says, could spell disaster in the fall's elections. With Biden's low approval numbers and the historic tendency of the president's party to lose, on average, 26 House seats in the midterms, the Democrats face an uphill battle to keep control of Congress, a situation that requires firing up the party's progressive base, Ocasio-Cortez said. Quote, we need to acknowledge that this isn't just about middle of the road and increasingly narrow band of independent voters. This is really about the collapse of support among young people, among the Democratic base, who are feeling that they worked overtime to get this president elected and aren't necessarily being seen, she said. Ocasio-Cortez and the other 97 members of the House Progressive Caucus are calling on Biden to issue executive orders to enact environmental protections, lower healthcare costs, cancel federal student loan debts, and expand protection for immigrants. So, the thing that she's calling for here is absolutely, at this point, the only Hail Mary pass that Democrats have to not get shellacked. It's their only out. Their only out is Biden, break out that executive order pen and make a real change with it. Not some minor executive orders that are tweaks around the edges. Break out that executive order pen and eliminate student loan debt. Eliminate it. Legalize marijuana, which you could do through executive order. Just take marijuana off the Schedule 1 substances list. If he wants to be meek about it, move it down to 2 or 3, but in reality, you just take it off of the list, and boom, you effectively have legalized marijuana in the country. There's a bunch of stuff he can do through executive order. He can lower prescription drug prices. He can expand healthcare during the COVID pandemic. To not do it is basically shooting yourself in the face if you're Biden and if you're the Democrats. So AOC notices that. And apparently her and a bunch of progressive caucus types are calling on Biden to do the executive orders. But I will say this. It's not enough just to call on him to do it. You know, I would meet with the president and have a band of a dozen badasses who are willing to take hostages and steal the Tea Party tactics. And so if a left caucus goes to Biden and says, listen, man, we'll block everything you're going to do from now for the rest of your time in office. Years. We don't care. We're going to block that. Unless and until you start signing real executive orders Free every nonviolent drug offender. Whatever. Make a list of 20 things. And there are 20 things he could do through executive order. Do it. And then the ball's in his court. And now he can go and whine and cry to the media. And maybe the media would come after the left caucus in a situation like that. But my guess is he doesn't want another problem on his plate, man. He doesn't want another problem on his plate. And if he has a mutiny among his own ranks, he's going to get his ass in line. Now, maybe you give him a list of 15 or 20 different executive orders and say, we're demanding all these. Maybe he doesn't sign all those. But that's when you cut a deal. And that's when Biden says, look, I'll do these 8 executive orders. And those 8 executive orders not only are good for the country, but then are also good for the electoral chances of Democrats who are absolutely getting draxed right now in the polls. Democrats need to win by like 5 to 7 points nationally in order to hold on to their seats in Congress. They're down 2 points. I mean, it is going to be an absolute bloodbath, man. And so she's actually trying to help, even though she's, phrasing it like, look, I'm against you and you should do it. No, she's like, this is going to help you. You should do it. You should do it. But again, the criticism I have of her is that the lack of solidarity among the left caucus and the lack of willing to really buck the party establishment leads them to just, it's all talk. Like, hey, we think you should do the executive orders. Okay, and then what? Don't just give him advice. He's not going to listen to it unless you make him listen to it. And the way you make him listen to it is I'll tank everything unless you do it. How about that? And I got 12 of us. That's enough of us to block anything you want. You won't be able to name a fucking bridge by the time I'm done with you. So break out that pen and do it. That's how you got to play politics. That's how you have to do it. And they're not doing it. So on the one hand, I give her credit for acknowledging the reality that you need to bring about real change in order to win. That's obvious. And she's one of few people who say it. But to not go further and enforce that change. Now, look, is there hope? There's some hope because fact of the matter is, it was AOC, it was Jamal Bowman, I think it was Ilhan Omar and some others. It was not Ro Khanna. Ro Khanna was wrong on this one, who said, no, we're sticking to the original deal. Because remember, the Build Back Better deal was, and Build Back Better had the original Build Back Better had a lot of fantastic provisions at elder care, universal pre-K, lower prescription drug prices, extended child tax credit, it's extra $300, $400 for people who desperately need it. Ro Khanna went back on the original deal and said, I will vote for the traditional infrastructure bill without it being attached to Build Back Better. It was just a handful, what they say in the article, 6 or 7 Democrats who stuck by the original deal who were like, no, I'm not voting for your shitty traditional infrastructure bill with a bunch of corporate giveaways. It's a half-ass watered-down bill. It's like $1 trillion or something like that when we need like $5 or $6 trillion for infrastructure. Because you guys said we are going to put it together with Build Back Better to ensure that Build Back Better can pass. That was the deal. That was the deal with Manchin, with Sinema, with all the conservative corporate Democrats, the right-wing Democrats. That was the deal. You guys are now violating the deal, so no, you do not have our votes. But unfortunately, there wasn't enough of them to actually win on that front. And Pramila Jayapal and Ro Khanna and the Democrats, who were dead wrong and got made a fool of, have not come to terms with that, which tells you what? They're going to get rolled again. In every negotiation going forward, they're going to get rolled again. Because not only did they lose, they didn't lose and then look in the mirror and say, wow, I fucked that up. They lost and then acted like they didn't do anything wrong. But if the goal was Build Back Better, that's the bill we really wanted and it didn't get through, well, you're a failure. So credit to her on that front. And she does deserve credit on that front. Her and the 6 or 7 who voted the right way because they stuck by the original deal. But the problem is, again, if you use that same tactic going forward, you need to have more solidarity. So you need like 12, 15, or whatever it is, of people in a left caucus, a true left caucus, not the bullshit fake progressive caucus, which is a lot of them are posers, in order to really force your will and shift the Overton window. So she's right that he needs to sign the executive orders. The other thing that can and should be done is, and this isn't as good as the executive orders, that's really the silver bullet to try to give the Democrats a fighting chance. But the other thing that could be done is, so take the individual provisions of Build Back Better that are popular enough, right? That even Manchin and Sinema have said, in theory, yeah, I'm with that. So one of them would be lower prescription drug prices. Another one would be, I think, universal pre-K, although Manchin may have flipped on that now, but at a time he was for it. and propose the bills individually. Propose them individually. I mean, there's other things you could do too, because that would at least where the dividing lines are. You know who's on the right side of it. You know who's on the wrong side of it. That helps for the election. At least you're fighting for something good if you go down that path. But the other thing is, they have the ability to just increase their cracks at reconciliation. And so if you say, hey, I know we get 3 cracks at reconciliation right now, or whatever it is, but now we're going to make it 20. Well, then you can do the single bills with single policies and do it through reconciliation. As opposed to, if you do reconciliation now with just one policy, it's not enough to put one thing in there because you only get a couple chances at it, so it's like a waste. But if you give yourself more cracks at it and then you do single policies for reconciliation and get everybody on the record, you only need 51 votes to get something through. So maybe you can get lower prescription drug prices. Maybe you can get universal pre-K. Certainly, it'll put a hell of a lot of political pressure on the likes of Manchin and Sinema because there's no way they could spin that vote to their constituents. It's one thing to do it if it's part of a giant package where you could point out one thing in the package you don't agree with and say, I'm against that, you have to drop it or I'm not voting for it. It's a totally separate thing if you just have a vote on universal pre-K or lower prescription drug prices and then you vote no on just that. That's another thing they could do. But again, Biden doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's barely alive. He's barely alive. He's not married to, social democratic change. And I don't even know, he might be so deep in his bubble that he genuinely thinks, like he said previously, the polls, they go up, they go down, stuff happens, and then it is what it is. So he doesn't even necessarily think that the polls are directly related to what he does as president, which is just insane. But anyway, AOC's warning everybody, hey man, Biden, you better do executive orders or we are beyond screwed. And my guess is, not only will he not listen, but now it will become the conventional wisdom that she's dead wrong and the opposite is true. And that is what the media does, isn't it? They're like, the way for Biden to have better poll numbers is obviously to be even more centrist and to do nothing even more and harder. Whatever corporate media says, reliably the exact opposite is the reality. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.